Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be tackling a topic that, well, frankly, doesn't get enough attention. Men's mental health. We'll be pulling insights from men's mental health, breaking the silence, embracing strength. You know, it's funny, I was thinking about this the other day and I was like, it seems like guys sometimes have a hard time even admitting they have mental health, let alone talking about it. What's the deal with that?
It really is kind of a head scratcher, isn't it? We've got this whole strong, silent type thing going on in society. But then that can actually make it way harder for men to say, hey, I'm struggling here. The book actually makes this point. For a lot of guys, asking for help, it feels like they're admitting defeat.
Right, like it's
And
a weakness or something.
exactly, like a crack in their armor. And that's where this whole silent epidemic thing comes in. There's this study in the book. Something like more than 75% of the men they talk to said they try to hide their feelings when they're going through something tough. That's got to be setting off alarm bells, right?
Yeah, for sure. So we're talking about way more than just a few guys feeling a little down here. This is like a widespread thing. But why is it so hard for them to open up? I mean, is it all just societal pressure? Or is there something deeper going on?
Well, the book gets into some interesting stuff about the evolutionary side of things. The idea that men were the protectors and providers way back when. So they
Uh-huh.
had to project this image of strength and competence. And then you pile on top of that all the cultural stuff we've inherited over the years about how real men don't show their feelings, vulnerability equals weakness, and boom, you've got a recipe for emotional suppression.
Wow. So it's like nature and nurture are both working against them? Kind of depressing when you think about it.
It can be. But hey, at least understanding where it's all coming from is a start, right? And recognizing the damage it does, that's huge. Like the book talks about how men can experience depression differently than women. Instead of just feeling sad, they might get irritable or start taking more risks or even turn to substance abuse. Seriously. So like that guy at the poker table who's betting like crazy, he might actually be depressed. That's not how I usually picture depression at all.
It's a classic example of how guys try to mask what's really going on inside.
Mhm.
You know, got to keep up that in-control image. So they channel all that emotional stuff into something else, something that gives them a sense of power, even if it's just temporary. The problem is, those coping mechanisms can totally backfire.
Okay, yeah, I see where you're going with that. This whole tough it out mentality can be seriously dangerous. But how do we even start to break down those expectations? They seem so ingrained. It's like fighting an uphill battle.
It is a tough one, but the book does offer some practical advice. First off, we got to normalize these conversations about mental health, and it starts with us right here, right now. The more we talk about it openly and honestly, the less stigma there'll be. And you know what? Men are paying attention. There was this study in the book that showed a big jump in the number of men seeking help after some high-profile guys started talking publicly about their own mental health struggles. So having role models is key. But what about the guys who are already struggling but keeping it all bottled up? How do we reach them?
That's where knowing the signs comes in. The book actually lists out some common red flags. Say you've got a friend who's suddenly withdrawn, or they're snapping at everyone, or maybe their sleep habits are all messed up, or they're not eating like they used to. Those are all signs that something might be wrong. Or maybe they're working like crazy, burying themselves in their job just to avoid dealing with their emotions.
Wow. I know a few people who fit that description. I never would have thought of those as potential signs of mental distress.
That's exactly why raising awareness is so important. We need to learn the signs ourselves and help the people around us learn them too.
Okay, so recognizing the signs is important, and normalizing the conversations is key. But what about actually getting help? There's still a lot of resistance to therapy,
Mm-hmm.
especially among men, right?
Yeah, you're not wrong. There's definitely still a stigma. But the book makes a really strong case for why therapy can be so helpful, especially for men. It's not just about sitting around and talking about your feelings. It's about developing practical coping skills, getting better at communication, and dealing with conflict, and understanding your own emotions and behaviors in a deeper way.
So it's like therapy isn't admitting defeat. It's more like taking control of your life.
Yeah.
That's a message that I think a lot more men could get behind.
You got it. And the book talks about how different types of therapy can work for different people, like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, that's focused on practical strategies for dealing with negative thoughts and behaviors. That might appeal to guys who are more action-oriented.
That's really interesting. I always thought of therapy as one size fits all, but it sounds like there are actually a lot of different options out there.
Absolutely. And don't forget about support groups. The book talks about how powerful peer support can be. especially for men who aren't quite ready for traditional therapy. Just being around other people who've gone through similar stuff can be incredibly validating and empowering.
It's like that saying, you don't have to go it alone. There's strength in numbers.
You said it. And that's what we're trying to do here. Create a sense of community and support, letting men know that they don't have to suffer in silence.
So we've talked about some of the reasons why men struggle to open up about their mental health. But now let's get into the nitty-gritty. What are some things guys can actually do to take care of themselves? What does the book recommend for those who want to be proactive about their well-being?
Well, one of the big themes in the book is this idea of self-care. It sounds pretty basic, but honestly, a lot of men end up neglecting their own needs. They're so busy trying to be successful or responsible or just trying to keep up appearances that they forget to take care of themselves.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Like they're so focused on everyone else that they put themselves last.
Exactly. And the book really hammers home this point. Self-care isn't selfish. It's essential. It's about recognizing that you can't give what you don't have. If you're not taking care of yourself, you're not going to be able to show up for the people in your life.
That's a good point. So what kind of self-care strategies does the book recommend? It's got to be more than just getting a massage every once in a while, right?
Oh, definitely. Massages are nice, but the book takes a much broader approach. It talks about 4 main areas of self-care: physical, emotional, mental.
And social.
Okay, I like that. A holistic approach.
Mm.
So let's break it down, starting with physical self-care. What does that look like for men? Besides the obvious stuff like eating right and exercising, which we all struggle with sometimes.
You're telling me. The book acknowledges that knowing what to do and actually doing it are 2 different things, but it also emphasizes the importance of sleep. It actually gets into the science behind it. How not getting enough sleep messes with your hormones, your mood, even your ability to think straight. That's interesting. I definitely know I'm not my best self when I'm sleep deprived.
Mm.
But what does the book say about actually improving sleep? Just count sheep?
Huh. It actually has some good tips for improving sleep hygiene, like setting a regular sleep schedule, creating a relaxing bedtime routine, and making sure your bedroom is optimized for sleep. Temperature, light, noise, all that stuff.
Okay, that's helpful. So we've got physical self-care covered. What about emotional self-care? What does that even mean for men, especially since they're often told to suppress their emotions?
This is where the book gets really interesting. It challenges this whole idea that men shouldn't have or express feelings. It argues that bottling up your emotions doesn't make them go away. It just drives them underground, where they can fester and come out in unhealthy ways.
It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. You can push it down, but it's just going to pop up somewhere else, probably with even more force.
Exactly. The book encourages men to develop what it calls emotional literacy, which is basically learning to recognize, understand, and express your emotions in a healthy way. And get this, it actually suggests journaling as a really powerful tool for this.
Journaling. I always thought that was more of
Yeah.
a feminine thing.
See? That's exactly the kind of stereotype the book is trying to break down. Journaling is just a way to process your thoughts and feelings. It's like having a conversation with yourself on paper, which can be super therapeutic.
Huh. That's a cool way to think about it. Maybe I should give it a shot myself.
I highly recommend it. It can be a real game changer.
Okay.
So moving on to mental self-care. The book talks about the importance of engaging in activities that challenge you mentally and give you a sense of purpose.
So we're talking hobbies, intellectual pursuits, things like that.
You got it. It could be anything from learning a new language to playing a musical instrument to taking up photography. The point is to find something you're passionate about, something that brings you joy and keeps your mind sharp.
I like that. Finding things that light you up, make you feel alive.
Exactly. And finally, we have social self-care. This one focuses on the importance of nurturing meaningful connections. We touched on this earlier, but the book goes deeper, explaining that social connection isn't just about having people around. It's about feeling seen, heard, and understood.
So it's about quality over quantity when it comes to relationships.
Absolutely. The book suggests some practical ways to strengthen those connections. Things like making time for friends and family, being present when you're with them, and doing activities you enjoy together.
It sounds like it's all about being intentional with your relationships.
Yeah.
Not just letting them happen, but actually putting in the effort to make them strong.
Precisely. And the book also stresses the importance of seeking out supportive relationships. It encourages men to surround themselves with people who lift them up, encourage them, and celebrate their successes.
That's so important. We all need those people in our lives. People who make us feel good about ourselves, people who believe in us.
Couldn't agree more. Now, I know we're really diving deep into the book's recommendations, but it's important to remember that self-care isn't one size fits all. It's about finding what works for you and making it a regular part of your routine.
Right. What works for one person might not work for another. It's all about finding what resonates with you personally.
Exactly. And, even small acts of self-care can make a big difference. It could be something as simple as taking 5 minutes to meditate, listening to your favorite music, or going for a walk in nature.
It's about those little moments of peace and rejuvenation.
Right, exactly.
All right.
Okay. Now, while self-care is super important for men's mental well-being, the book also acknowledges that sometimes you need more than that. Sometimes professional help is necessary.
That's true. Self-care is great, but it's not a substitute for professional help when you need it.
Right. And the book does a really good job of explaining the different types of therapy and mental health professionals out there. It talks about therapists, psychiatrists, counselors, psychologists, so men can make informed decisions about what kind of support they need.
That's really helpful. I think a lot of people are confused about the different types of mental health professionals.
Yeah.
It's like, who do I even call?
It can be overwhelming, for sure. But the book does a great job of demystifying the process. It also offers tips for finding a therapist who's a good fit for you, someone you feel comfortable and safe with.
That makes sense. Therapy is such a personal thing.
Yeah.
So you got to have a good connection with your therapist.
Totally. Now, besides therapy, the book also highlights some other great resources for men's mental health.
Oh, yeah. Like what else is out there?
Well, support groups, for one,
Yeah.
those can be amazing for connecting with other guys who are going through similar stuff. And there are tons of online resources, too. Websites, forums, all dedicated to men's mental health. Those can be great places to find information support and a sense of community.
I hadn't thought about that. But it makes sense. There's so much information and support available online these days.
It's incredible. And then there are helplines, both national, local, specifically for mental health. Guys can call and talk to trained professionals, completely confidential. It's a lifeline for those who are feeling lost and alone.
That's so crucial. Especially for guys who might be feeling overwhelmed or don't know where to turn.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, while the book focuses mostly on individual strategies and resources, it also talks about the importance of systemic change.
What do you mean by that? What kind of systemic changes are we talking about?
Well, for one thing, it advocates for more funding for mental health services and research. It argues that mental health should be treated just as importantly as physical health, and that everyone should have access to care, regardless of their background.
I agree with that. It shouldn't be so hard to find affordable and accessible mental health care.
You said it. The book also calls for more mental health education in schools and workplaces. It stresses the importance of catching things early, teaching kids about mental health and giving them coping skills.
Yeah, that's huge. It's about creating a culture where mental health is something we talk about openly and honestly from a young age.
Exactly. And it challenges workplaces to create more supportive environments for men. Things like flexible work arrangements, mental health days, employee assistance programs.
Those are all great ideas. It's about recognizing that people have lives and challenges outside of work, and that those things affect their mental health.
For sure. And finally, the book calls for a dismantling of all those harmful gender stereotypes that contribute to the stigma surrounding men's mental health. We need to stop telling men they should be tough and stoic all the time, and start celebrating vulnerability as a strength.
That's such an important message. We need to create a world where men feel comfortable expressing their emotions and asking for help when they need it, without feeling ashamed or judged.
Absolutely. And I think that's really the heart of this book, to create a society that truly supports men's mental health and well-being.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like I've learned so much about the challenges and opportunities surrounding men's mental health. But before we wrap up this part, is there anything else you want to highlight from this section on practical strategies and resources?
I think the main takeaway is that there's no magic bullet for men's mental health.
Right.
What works for one guy might not work for another. It's about finding what feels right for you, what resonates with your individual needs and preferences.
You got it. It's about taking ownership of your mental well-being and finding the tools and resources that help you live a healthier, happier, more fulfilling life.
Exactly. And I think this book gives men the information and inspiration they need to get started on that journey.
This has been awesome. I feel more equipped to take care of my own mental health now. How about you?
Me too. Definitely feeling hopeful and ready to make a difference.
So we've talked a lot about what individuals can do. But this book, Men's Mental Health, Breaking the Silence, Embracing Strength, it doesn't just stop there. It really goes into how men's mental health affects everyone, like the whole society. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a really important point. The book makes this argument that men's mental health, it's not just a personal thing, it's a societal thing. When men are struggling and they don't talk about it, it affects everything: families, workplaces, communities, even the economy.
Wow. So we're talking about way more than just individual well-being here. We're talking about the well-being of society as a whole. That's kind of a big deal.
It is. It really is. And the book have all these statistics that back it up, like studies that show a strong link between men's mental health and things like how productive people are at work, rates of substance abuse, even violence and aggression.
That's intense. It's not just about men taking care of themselves. It's about creating a society that supports men's mental well-being.
Right. Exactly. And the book makes this really convincing argument that investing in men's mental health, it's not just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. Everyone benefits.
I like that. It's not just about being compassionate. It just makes sense.
Right. And the book actually lays out some specific steps that society can take to create a more supportive environment for men.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, for starters, it pushes for more funding for mental health services and research. It says that mental health should be just as important as physical health in our healthcare system.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
We need to make sure men can actually get the help they need when they need it. And it shouldn't cost a fortune.
Absolutely. The book also calls for more education about mental health in schools and workplaces. Teaching young people about mental health early on, giving them coping skills. That's key for prevention.
Yeah, definitely. We need to normalize talking about mental health from a young age.
Exactly. And it challenges workplaces to step up, too. Create environments that are actually supportive of men. Things like being flexible with work schedules, offering mental health days, having employee assistance programs.
That's great. It's about recognizing that people have lives outside of work, and those lives can affect their mental health.
For sure. And last but not least, the book says we got to get rid of those harmful gender stereotypes that make it so hard for men to talk about their mental health. It's time to stop telling men they have to be tough and emotionless all the time. Vulnerability is a strength, not a weakness.
That's so true. We need a world where men can be open about their emotions and ask for help without feeling ashamed or judged.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And I think that's the ultimate goal of this book, to create a society that truly understands and supports men's mental health.
This has been such an amazing conversation. I feel like I've learned so much. But before we wrap up, what's the one thing you hope our listeners will take away from this discussion?
If there's just one thing I want people to remember, it's that men's mental health matters. It matters to individuals, it matters to families, and it matters to society. We need to break the silence, challenge those stereotypes, and create a world where men feel empowered to take care of their mental well-being.
I love that. And it feels like the conversation is finally starting to shift. We're starting to see more awareness and acceptance around men's mental health, which is so encouraging.
It really is. And I think this book is a huge part of that. It gives us a real plan for understanding and addressing men's mental health, both for individuals and for society as a whole.
Well said. Well, we've covered a ton of ground today,
Yeah.
and I'm feeling really inspired to take action. What about you?
Absolutely. Feeling hopeful and ready to make a difference.
I think our listeners are feeling it too. So to everyone out there, keep the conversation going. Learn about the resources out there. Support the men in your life. And let's work together to make men's mental health a priority, not a taboo subject.
Couldn't agree more. Remember, asking for help is never a weakness. It's a sign of strength. Let's create a world where every man feels supported, valued, and empowered to live a mentally healthy life.
Beautifully said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We hope you found it helpful and inspiring. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep supporting each other.